Hello people, it's me Christy and welcome to Makeup on Point. Now I know this channel has been abandoned for a way too long now, and today we are going to change it. However, this channel is going to take a different turn upon this comeback. We're still going to play with makeup, beauty, and SFX, but we're also going to talk about some fun behind the scenes facts about your favorite TV shows and movies. So, if you want to learn something today, let's get into it. Okay, so I did my brows off camera using the Creme Shop brow pomades. I used the color Taupe for mine. And for today's video, we're actually going to be using the Sugarpill Capsule collection. So let's prime our eyes. And we are going to discuss the Powerpuff Girls today. Not the reboot, the original. So, let's start with how the idea of the Powerpuff Girls came together and how they got started. So the show was actually created by a man named Craig McCracken, and the show was created in 1992 while he was actually still in school at Cal Arts. So he came up with the idea wanting to create a cartoon based on some kick-ass superhero girls. So he created the whole concept and idea and created a whole student film for it. Now, originally, the Powerpuff Girls were not called the Powerpuff Girls. The show originally was called Whoop-Ass Stew, because instead of Chemical X in the beginning, they were actually made by an accidental dose of a can of Whoop-Ass. So obviously, later on when it was bought by Cartoon Network, that was changed since, you know, adults did not want their kids to hear such profanity. Now, the look of the Powerpuff Girls came from the art of a Miss Margaret Keane, and her artwork depicted a lot of big round oval faces and big eyes. And he preferred this look more because he even tried to give the Powerpuff Girls more human realistic with like noses and fingers, but just he said it didn't carry the same effect that he wanted for his superhero team. The original cartoon actually showcased the same title sequence you see now, except it didn't have all those villains that we know and love today. They originally in the title sequence had just the Gangrene Gang, our green skin hoodlums as they describe it, and it featured the Amoeba Boys robbing the bank and the girls saving the day. And with the original cartoon, the only other character that had a big major difference in it was Professor Utonium. Now, Professor Utonium is now known for his lab coat, straight angular features, his black hair and everything. But in the original cartoon, he was a triangular looking character, bald with a big headband and a big like a typical doctor back in the day type headband with the big, what is that thing called? It's like a metal like stethoscope headband. Someone please tell me what that is down below. And he just grabbed the can of Whoop-Ass with mixing it with sugar and spice and everything nice. So then after school, he sold it to Hanna-Barbera Productions, which are very known for like the Huckleberry Hound cartoons, the Flintstones, Jetsons, Johnny Quest, Scooby-Doo. So he sent it out to them, and their president, Fred Siebert, bought it to air for Cartoon Network. Changes, like I told you, changing Whoop-Ass Stew to the Powerpuff Girls, changing Professor Utonium's looks, and coming up with all these extra characters, which then now aired on November 18th, 1998. I think I'm going to take this shade here called Karma. I'm going to use it as my transition shade. May go for a buttercup look with some bubble aspects. I'm not sure yet. So let's talk about our girls here. Blossom, our self-proclaimed leader of the group, actually has each of the girls carry their own ingredient to their personality. So for Blossom, she is actually the ingredient everything nice. And they've made her the leader, that they even represented this in her look with the bow, so it could represent a crown as her being the leader. She is our strong and determined character who tries to do everything right. Now our next ingredient will be sugar in the form of Bubbles, our softest and sweetest little girl, who is behind me right here somewhere, right there. She is our softest sweet girl, however she has such rage that it goes from 0 to 100 real quick. And she also has the extra power ability of speaking multiple languages, which is a fun little thing. Blossom, which I forgot to mention, Blossom has the secret power of being able to, oh, I can't do this, to have ice breath and on occasion fire breath. Special power. Now our last ingredient, spice, is obviously our lovely tough tomboy girl Buttercup. Now Buttercup loves to get down and dirty and likes to just go on and fight without really thinking about it. And she was actually one of the Powerpuff Girls that did not get a secret power until later, when they decided to give her the power of rolling her tongue and being the only one in Townsville to roll her tongue. Sure. She actually also almost didn't have the name Buttercup. She was also, because of her tomboy nature, was going to be called Bud. Imagine Blossom's Bubbles and Bud. So Craig McCracken changed it after his friend mentioned that maybe Buttercup would be a better name for that. Since we're going for Buttercup, we're gonna take this green color here called Radiate. With that, let's talk about our villains. Now I'm not gonna talk about every single villain because this video would be 10 years long. So let's start with our main villains. And the way they wanted to create these villains is on a spectrum. So they want them to be on a spectrum from super duper dumb, like the Amoeba Boys, to extremely evil, like our character and villain, him, which we'll talk about later. But first we're going to talk about the character that falls in the middle of this spectrum. We are going to talk about Mr. Mojo Jojo. Yeah. Mojo Jojo is our chimpanzee villain, mad scientist, who likes to plan to take over Townsville practically every episode and wants to destroy the Powerpuff Girls. But funny that he wants to destroy them, since in a later episode it is shown that Mojo Jojo helped create the Powerpuff Girls, since he used to be the professor's assistant. And it was actually that explosion of him accidentally pushing the professor into the chemical X that created the Powerpuff Girls. And that explosion actually caused for his brain to grow and be exposed. His character design actually was inspired by a Japanese live action series called Spectrum. And there's a character in it called Dr. Gory that has the same monkey-headed villain design that he has. So his outfit was inspired by another Japanese show called Cage Star, which provided the iconic white and purple striped helmet that he has that covers his exposed brain. And in further emphasis of that Japanese culture kind of inspiring him, which is kind of a little too stereotypical in a way, is in the way that he speaks. His dialogue is a very exaggerated Japanese accent that even, it's rumored, so I've read this in a couple places, but I'm not sure how true it fully is. Even the rhythmic tone of his dialogue is inspired from the cartoon Speed Racer.
Okay, now I'm going to give you a taste of the medicine you deserve. As former champion of the West Side Grunters and Groaners, I promise you're in for a lot of groaning.
Now on to our next villains, which appeared, actually I'm going to use my finger to put this on, who appeared in the original title sequence, was the Gangrene Gang. Now their character design came from one big question actually. What if Big Daddy Ed Roth designed the gang of Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids? Now, Ed Roth is the artist who created the anti-Mickey Mouse named Rat Fink. And they conceived it with that motion of making these mutated green skin hoodlums that even Rat Fink's exposed eyes are in the character design of one of the Gangrene Gang, which is Grubber. Now this Gangrene they all have names. Ace is the leader, and the rest of them is Snake, Little Arturo, Grubber, and Big Billy. They are categorized by the writers as the hoodlums who live in the Townsville dump. And their crimes, unlike Mojo Jojo, concentrate on petty crimes like vandalism and just harassing people all around. Now let's talk about possibly my favorite villain of the bunch. One whose name has even been said his real name would cause people to, what do they say again? Explode. So let's talk about him. Oh boy. Where do I even begin with him? The most sinister, mysterious, effeminate demon villain of the bunch, who concentrates on psychological horror. Isn't that nice? So, how him came about in his devilish character, he is actually, if you've seen the film, inspired by the blue meanie in the Beatles film Yellow Submarine.
That land is a tickle of joy on the blue belly of the universe. It must be scratched.
The blue meanie is a big influence for him, but obviously that's better. They decided to take it in a more devilish nature. Actually, there is a small, you can actually find it on YouTube. There's a storyboard version of the original cartoon of him with the Powerpuff Girls that his original name was going to be Devil. Plain Devil. Because it was already enough with that devilish costume to already think he was a devil. They wanted to give him the name Devil. However, Cartoon Network did not want a religious, I'm using a lot of blending brushes right now. They did not want to use a religious reference, especially one that is the devil, out on their show. So they changed his name to just him to give him more of that mysterious, villainous nature. He is made to be the most evil and most powerful. He even can get into the girls' dreams and can really get into everyone's head. He even has the power pretty much to take over the world. But I think he focuses more on just the torture, the psychological torture of the girls than anything else, if you actually pay attention to those episodes, which I'm going to discuss about some episodes later. But even when it comes to him is an interesting character, but when you really think about him deep down, I think he can be, even his first initial shot of the narrator talking about him, and we're just zooming in on him sitting on his couch, and it's just like, you just feel it on the back of your neck, the hairs rise up, because you're just like, something about this guy is just terrifying. I think if they made a horror movie based on the character of him, I think that would be the most psychologically scary horror movie we'll ever get. If done right, though. If done right. Let's get into the speaking about some of our adult dark themed episodes. Starting with some from season 1. First one being Boogie Frights. An episode all about being afraid of the dark and the boogeyman. So the whole episode first starts out, did I make it too dark? We're gonna make it work. Starts with Bubbles being the main focus of her fear because she's afraid of the dark, same. And the professor talks about this huge message to her, how you have to conquer your fears. I think I made this way too dark. You have to face your fears to conquer your fears. What a lovely, lovely episode. A lovely message, I mean. But then it pans down, that's better. So it pans down to the underground layer that is the boogeyman's party disco layer. And his whole thing is that they can't party all the time because they can only come out when it's dark out. So he's concocted this plan so he can be out all the time by creating this big block on the sun, kind of looking like the Death Star, to block the whole sun so they can be out all day and all night without being affected by any light. And this episode is quite terrifying. And the monsters that come out, that there's even, it's not the base of the episode, is how the monsters come out of the bed. They're all crawling out from underneath all these kids' beds. They're coming out of the refrigerator for the adults. There's this big dog peeing on a car. But then there's this one scene that's particularly frightening, at least to me, that's very reminiscent of The Grudge, where there's a mummy monster that comes from underneath the blanket next to the kid, looks at the kid screams in the top of his lungs, and the kid's in a car bed and just drives away. And I was just like, that is a nightmare-filled episode if I didn't ever see one before. That's only the tip. It's only the tip. That's only the little bit of the scariness of Powerpuff Girl episodes. Our next episode is a very zombie episode, and the zombie is not the scary part. It's more of the violent nature in how the zombie became his zombie. The episode is called Abracadabra. Again, it's actually in the same episode with Boogie Frights. So there's a magician called Illusion. First of all, great pun name. And he's an old-time magician, and the mayor's telling this story how during one of the shows he had, he asked for a volunteer from the audience. He picks this little girl to get on the stage with him to help him with this trick, and during this trick she accidentally pulls down his pants, and so everyone's laughing at him, and he's an embarrassed magician doing all this. So he's doing all this, and now everyone's laughing at him, and now he's losing his footing since his pants are around his ankles. And he falls back and back and back, and he falls into a medieval death trap of a coffin that has spikes, which I'm gonna show right here. And it's just such a violent death to watch. That episode came out, I believe, that was during season 1. It was 1999. The episode came out in 1999. I know cartoons during the 90s were very adult themed, but dear God, that was such a violent death. To even watch now as an adult, that was just hard to watch. And they even use that coffin later. And when, like, the Powerpuff Girls, he becomes a zombie, tortures the town. And he grabs the girls, he concentrates on Blossom when he sees her because she looks like the same girl that put him to where he is now. So he starts hypnotizing her as a magician would, because for some reason this magician, he's a zombie magician that has superpowers. So he's hypnotizing her with the watch, and then he puts, as Buttercup and Bubbles are trying to save Blossom, he puts Buttercup in a box to be sawed in half to death, and he throws Bubbles in a bag and throws her in a water tank to, you know, drown. And then he takes Bubbles, so now she's completely hypnotized and just not there, and he wraps her up and then uses her like a yo-yo towards the medieval trap and just teasing and teasing. And all of a sudden Blossom is in it, and he, to your knowledge, at that point he just killed the Powerpuff Girls. Buttercup's being sawed in half, Bubbles just probably drowned, and Blossom just died in a medieval death. Got killed with spikes in a medieval death trap. But you know, it quickly turns because somehow all the Powerpuff Girls have magical powers and know the illusions of magic, and use it to your advantage and just all of a sudden be like, hey, we switched, we're really alive, and Illusion's in that back in that coffin again, and you just see his arm go limp and just, again, it's not the tone of the episode, it's the violence of that death. Next episode can actually be relevant in today's world. The episode is from season 2, and it is, oh, I missed the spot. It's called Collect Her. And in this episode, there's a fan of the Powerpuff Girls. And he's very, like, typical nerdy, at least in the way they drew him. He is a nerdy super fan of the Powerpuff Girls. And his goal in life, being this super fan, is to collect all merchandise of the Powerpuff Girls, like Powerpuff Girls cheese board. So he collects everything of Powerpuff Girl merchandise because he's so obsessed with the Powerpuff Girls. But he reaches a point in which he's collected everything. He's checking his computer because he has a system in his computer that lets him know what is he missing from his Powerpuff Girls collection. And it comes to the point where he's completed his collection. And this upsets him like no other. Like, wait, no, that can't be true. Because he's so obsessed with the act of collecting because he loves the Powerpuff Girls so much. So since he's completed, he's like, well, what's the next thing I can do? If I can't buy any more Powerpuff Girl merchandise, well, I'm just going to have to kidnap the Powerpuff Girls and make them part of my collection, and I'll officially be complete. So he tricks the Powerpuff Girls into coming into his home, and then he just kidnaps them. I know the message of the episode is, like, I guess, be careful, because it very comes off of, like, this creepy old man can just kidnap little girls. But it's just the idea of it, like, because this is very even relevant today with how everything works on the internet. Like, people can just, we've had many horror stories on that, and it's just like the creepiness of the factor and how they draw him, the stalker fan theme of the episode. And it's like, yeah, you get the message out, and thank God, like, the the professor in all of Townsville found the Powerpuff Girls and saved them, even though all he did was put them in, like, action figure type seals to keep them forever. But that is such a dark and just, I think it's one of those episodes a little too real. Like, any, like, famous person, famous YouTuber, famous influencer, if someone is obsessed with them enough, you really gotta just be careful who's out there, honestly. Ooh, yes. This episode. Next one is called Dream Scheme. And the reason this one terrified me the most, honestly, because it let me start from the beginning. So the episode begins talking about the Sandman, the man who puts the sand on your eyes to help you go to sleep every night. And so with a schedule like the Sandman, because only just him, and you know, every country, every city goes to sleep at different times every day, it gets quite exhausting for the Sandman. So the Sandman becomes, all he wants to do at some point, because he's getting so exhausted from his job, is he just wants to go to sleep. He doesn't get any rest, he's overworked. I'm sure a lot of us understand what that means. However, since he's, again, the Sandman in control of how everyone sleeps, he's the only one in charge, and the moment he gets to go to rest, his alarm goes off that someone else gotta go to sleep, and they're still awake, and it's time for them to go to bed. So he reaches his burning point, but he's like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm making everybody go to sleep for a long time because I need some rest. So everybody's going to sleep around, puts everyone to sleep with piles of sand on their eyes. But of course, the Powerpuff Girls in this episode, they don't want to go to sleep. And they're the last ones to go to sleep, because when he finally gets to bed after making everyone have a possible eternal sleep, the bell goes off again. And so he shoots this laser at the Powerpuff Girls. Or what this? Yeah. He shoots the laser at the Powerpuff Girls to force them to go to sleep. And now he can finally rest. He shot the laser. The girls are going to sleep. The girls somehow, though, because, you know, it's a cartoon and they just get to do things. Girls, in their sleep, all of a sudden are sleeping all within the same dream bubble. And they're like, hey, what happened? They realize they're asleep and don't appreciate the Sandman forcing them to go to sleep. Get this idea like, hey, he shouldn't have put us to sleep like that, and now everybody's asleep all the time. Let's give him a taste of his own medicine. So with that, they decide to give him the nightmare to end all nightmares, so he will never ever want to sleep again. The images of the nightmare they give the Sandman is a little too real. So there's a scene in the nightmare specifically that really got to me. The whole nightmare as a whole is just scary. But there's a scene where he's running down the hallway and he just sees scary images. Even the Powerpuff Girl music in the background is slowed down. And it's one of the things of a typical nightmare or any dream where you're running, but you think you're running so fast, but you feel something slowing you and pulling you down, and you're watching it because they changed the whole image, which I think I'm going to put up here. They changed the whole image of the episode. You see him running and it just gets, and then he turns around and he sees the girls just staring dead at him, coming so like, it's just very scary. Again, this is a kid's cartoon, and it has the most horrific nightmare that I think I even had that nightmare after watching that episode. And then you have Bubbles all of a sudden becoming big and chomping him down. There's a lot of like mixed, there's a part where the girls are roosters and they're going in to eat him and bite him, and then it just gets very scary. And then, so the moral of the episode is just, they scare the Sandman so much that he never wants to sleep again. This man, that all he wanted to do was get some sleep after being so overworked for all these years, letting other people sleep. And they just give him the worst nightmare possible so he can never sleep again. Now, I want to talk about our most adult episode called Knock It Off from season 4. Oh, the adult themes of this episode. This may be a little too... Oh no, that's perfect. So, I'm actually using the Sugarpill palette for my blush, by the way. Using the color Retrograde. So in this episode, the professor's old college roommate, Professor Dick Hardley, calls the professor up because he misses him, wants to visit him, and so on and so forth. And they do a whole flashback sequence of Professor Dick Hardley. And Dick is a very, very womanizing college guy who likes to copy the professor's work so he can pass. And he's been doing this his whole college career. Since he is focusing on women, then there's even a scene during this flashback sequence when the professor is looking at looking through a telescope to see the stars, and he's like, wow, Dick, look at all these stars, isn't it amazing, the wonders of the world? And Dick was just like, yeah, as Dick is looking through a telescope into an apartment with these two girls in their underwear being a peeping Tom. Good job, Dick. So Professor Dick Hardley comes to the professor to visit him, amazed that the professor's still into science. And Professor Dick Hardley wants to go straight to the professor's lab, and Dick Hardley looks and sees the Powerpuff Girls and just big money sign on his eyes. He's like, you created these girls, Professor? And the professor's like, yes, Dick. I created those girls, sort of, but I'm also their dad. And they're my greatest creations. And Dick is like, you've got a gold mine here. You gotta take advantage of this. Why are you not making money off of this? And the professor's getting really mad, saying Dick, and Dick is just still going off, and the professor's just yelling Dick's name over and over until Dick finally gets it in his head. Ow, I hit that a little too hard to my head. To tell him to get the F out, because those are my girls, and we're not going to talk about my girls in that nature. He kicks him out, and Dick is very much like, what are you doing? This is a gold mine. So he leaves. He picks up the girls from school, and the girls are like, oh, hi, Professor Dick. How are you doing, Professor Dick? So he asks the girls how they're made. They tell him how he's made. He tricks them into giving him the chemical X to help make them superpowers. And then so he gets to an old evil lab, as the episode gives. And Professor Dick mass produces a whole bunch of Powerpuff Girls, calling them the Powerpuff Girls Extreme. Wow, Professor Dick, you're doing wonders. And you're wondering probably at this point, why am I saying Professor Dick, Dick, Dick so many times? That's how many times I heard his name being called in this episode. I even counted how many times they said Dick throughout this whole episode. The episode is 21 minutes long. This episode was brought out in 2001. I counted around 32 times they've said Dick. This is the most time I've heard the girls say a villain's name in any episode. They don't say Mojo Jojo that many times. Now I know the writers had fun just slipping that in because that's a word they're allowed to say. But that's not even the full total of how many times they say Dick in the episode, because at some point, so in this mass manufacturing of these Powerpuff Girl Extreme, you know, as mass producing things, there's gonna be some defective ones. So he has a room of all these defective Powerpuff Girls, which are frightening images on their own. And there's a point where the professor goes to save the Powerpuff Girls, and because there's a whole scene, Professor Dick swallows chemical X because he didn't want to give it to the girls that are trying to get it. Then he puts them in a contraption that's trying to suck the chemical X out of the girls. And the professor tries to give a deal like, take me instead, leave the girls alone. And in the chemical X new monster that is Professor Dick, he's like, well, I can have you both. And he has his defective Powerpuff Girl Extremes come and take the professor away. And as the professor is watching his girls get sucked out, get their lives sucked out of them, he yells at them like, I love you, girls. And they say, I love you too. And all the defective Powerpuff Girls see this and they're like, wait, because then in this episode it proves there's another ingredient to the Powerpuff Girls, and that's the ingredient of love. And now at this point, all these defective Powerpuff Girls were like, you never loved us. You never loved us. And they turn on him and they go towards Dick. And this is where I lose count of counting all the amount of dicks in the episode, because then they start chanting, Dick. Dick! Dick! You never gave us love! And then it gets darker after that, because now all the defective Powerpuff Girls are gonna help them. They got the real Powerpuff Girls out. They got the professor free. They start setting the factory on fire, and the girls like, no, come, we can save you too. And they're like, no, get out. So they pretty much like they literally sacrifice themselves with blowing up the factory to kill Dick Hardley and them in it to save the world. And I'm just like, that was just a roller coaster of an episode. It was a lot of Dick. Alright, so I'm back. I pretty much did the same eyeshadow on my bottom lash line. I popped in the color Cloud 9, which is Submarine blue shade in the inner corner. Added my wing liner using my Inglot gel liner and put on some Maybelline mascara. On my lashes, these are Pinky Rose lashes in the style Star. Alright, I also added a black lipstick. This one's from Pretty Zombie Cosmetics called Black Cat. I also added these reflective dots just for fun because, you know, why not? So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed the makeup look that I created for it, and I hope you enjoyed listening to some of these interesting TV facts about the Powerpuff Girls. Let me know your thoughts. What are your favorite things about the Powerpuff Girls? Let me know in the comments below, not description box. That's not how that works. Everything I use in this video will be listed in the description box below. I'm also going to put some links down in the description box for like petitions and things, because there is a lot happening in our real world that we really should all look into and find ways to help. Because as much as we could watch TV and watch movies as distractions, we have to remember that there's a real world that needs saving all of its own. We need our own Powerpuff Girls, don't you think? I'm gonna leave you with just some kind words of please be kind to others, love yourself, and I will see you in the next video. We're gonna have some fun kick-ass movies to talk about, and wait till Halloween comes around. I have a lot of ideas coming, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.